She had always been the quiet strength behind him, the calm, graceful woman who stood beside Pastor Mike Todd as he preached to thousands. People admired their love, their unity, their faith. Social media was flooded with their pictures, matching outfits, family vacations, perfect captions. To the world, they looked like the perfect couple. But you won't believe how much of it was an illusion. For years, she wore a smile that hid her silence. She cheered him on from the front row while feeling completely invisible in her own life. Let me tell you, what looked like love was slowly becoming a cage. From the outside, it all seemed perfect. Pastor Mike was on fire. Church services packed, online sermons going viral, his name respected in every corner of the Christian world. His wife, always present, always supportive, always silent, but this is how the pain started. Quietly, slowly, without anyone noticing. She had dreams too, hopes too. But as his name got bigger, hers got smaller. While he stood on stages, she disappeared in the background. Her voice, her identity, her feelings, all buried under the weight of being the pastor's wife. It started with small things. She would try to share her feelings, how lonely she felt, how the attention from the world didn't make up for the absence of her husband at home. But he would brush it off, tell her she was overthinking, say things like, "You're too sensitive," or "You should be grateful." And at first, she believed him. After all, this was the man she loved, the man she believed was chosen by God. But here is the shocking part. Those words weren't just innocent dismissals. Over time, they became patterns. Patterns of emotional control, patterns that made her question herself, her thoughts, her worth. She tried to be everything he needed, a wife, a mother, a ministry partner. But the more she gave, the more he took. And what makes this story different? She didn't leave because of one big fight or some public scandal. No, it was death by 1,000 quiet wounds, little things that built up over time, silent nights, dismissed emotions, and a man who was slowly becoming a stranger. But this is where it gets interesting. She started noticing things that didn't make sense, late-night disappearances, sudden mood swings, excuses that didn't match. She wanted to believe it was just stress, just ministry pressure. But deep down, something told her otherwise. She began to connect the dots. The energy crashes, the unexplained absences, the way he'd get defensive whenever she asked questions. And then finally, the truth came out. He had been battling a hidden addiction. For how long? She didn't even know. All she knew was that the man she had prayed with, lived with, built a life with, wasn't the man she thought he was. The craziest part? Even after finding out, she didn't expose him right away. She still tried to save it, still tried to be the glue. But the more she tried, the more she lost herself. She was living a lie, and the weight of that lie was destroying her from the inside. Every time she smiled for the camera, every time she sat in the front pew, clapping, she felt like she was betraying her own soul. She reached a point where silence felt heavier than truth. Every day she woke up beside him, the air between them colder than the night before. The home they once called sacred had turned into a quiet battlefield. No shouting, no slamming doors, just distance and a deep ache that words couldn't fix. She tried to pray it away, to fast, to fight it spiritually. But what do you do when the storm you're fighting isn't outside your home, but living right inside it? The weight of pretending became unbearable. She had to smile for church members, take photos for Instagram, attend events, and act like nothing was wrong. But inside, she was breaking piece by piece. Every sermon he preached about love, loyalty, and truth started to sound like a knife to her heart, because she knew behind those words was a different reality. And destiny took an unexpected turn the day she finally said, "Enough." She didn't scream, she didn't curse. She just looked in the mirror and realized the woman staring back at her wasn't the same anymore. Her eyes didn't shine, Her spirit felt empty. She had spent years being a shadow of herself, supporting him while losing herself. The moment she decided to speak out wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. She knew that exposing the truth would shake the ministry, the followers, the image. But what was the point of saving an image that was built on a lie? As she began to share her truth, privately, cautiously, the reactions were explosive. Some friends turned cold. Some church members whispered behind her back. Messages poured in, many filled with judgment. Why would you do this to the church? You're supposed to cover your husband. But she wasn't just someone's wife. She was a woman who had suffered in silence for too long, and finally she was done. But the backlash didn't stop there. What makes this story even more heartbreaking is what happened next. People she thought would support her, the very community she had poured her life into, began to attack her character. They called her bitter. They said she was lying. They questioned her faith, as if being married to a pastor meant she had no right to feel hurt, as if loyalty meant staying quiet while drowning in pain. Let me tell you, it hurt more than anything, not just the marriage falling apart, but watching the same people who praised her for years now tear her apart. She wasn't trying to destroy him, she was trying to heal herself. She wasn't trying to embarrass the church, she was trying to stop hiding. And then came the turning point. Messages started coming in, but not all negative. Quiet DMs from women saying, "I've been through this too," mothers, wives, even daughters. People who had suffered silently in toxic marriages, especially inside religious spaces, felt seen for the first time. Her truth, though painful, became someone else's lifeline. But here is the shocking part. It wasn't just emotional neglect and addiction. The more she looked back, the more she recognized the control, the manipulation, the way he would use scripture to keep her quiet, to guilt her into staying, to make her feel that her pain was a test of faith instead of what it really was, abuse hidden in holy words. That realization broke her heart even more. She knew speaking publicly would damage his reputation. She knew people would accuse her of betrayal, but staying silent meant dying slowly every day. And no image, no church, no man was worth that. The illusion had already stolen too much of her life. Now it was time to break it. The storm had finally broken, the truth was out, and now there was no turning back. With every passing day, the impact of her decision began to unfold like an avalanche. The image that had taken years to build, a loving, God-fearing couple at the center of a thriving ministry, was now cracking in front of thousands. Headlines started swirling, church gossip exploded. Her name was now part of the conversation, not as the pastor's strong wife, but as the woman who dared to tell the truth. And this is where it gets interesting, because even as her world seemed to fall apart, something unexpected began to rise within her. She felt a strange sense of peace, not because the pain had stopped, but because the pretending had. She no longer had to smile through sermons or nod during interviews that praised their unshakable bond. She had finally removed the mask. And in that moment, for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. It wasn't easy. The whispers still hurt, the judgment still stung, but something had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. Let me tell you, this part of her journey was the hardest. Not the exposure, not the backlash, but the silence that followed. The long nights where the house felt too quiet. The mornings where she reached for a man who was no longer hers. The guilt of her children being caught in the crossfire. The memories of better times haunted her like ghosts. But she held on to one thing, the knowledge that truth was better than illusion, even if it hurt. She poured herself into healing. Therapy became her new sanctuary, not a pulpit, not a pew, just a quiet space where she could finally talk and be heard. She began writing, journaling every memory, every moment of confusion, every red flag she had ignored. And in those pages she found something sacred, her voice, not the voice that had echoed behind her husband's success, but the one she had buried years ago under sacrifice and submission. This was the woman who once painted but gave it up to run the house, The woman who loved music but turned it off when he said it was a distraction. The woman who laughed loudly before being told to tone it down for the image. That woman was coming back, slowly but surely. Destiny took an unexpected turn once again when she received a message that changed everything. A well-known women's conference invited her to speak, not as a pastor's wife, but as a survivor. At first, she hesitated. Who was she to speak now? What could she possibly offer when her marriage had ended in controversy? But deep inside, she knew. This wasn't about being perfect. This was about being real. When she stood on that stage, she didn't preach. She spoke, raw, honest, broken, but healing. And the crowd didn't judge. They cried, they clapped, they came forward after, not for photos, but to share their own stories. Stories of quiet suffering, of being silenced, of hiding pain behind praise. In that moment, she realized, her voice wasn't just hers. It was a mirror for so many others who thought they were alone. The craziest part? Even men reached out, pastors, husbands, brothers, some apologizing for the way they had treated women, others admitting their own struggles with control, pride, or addiction. Her truth had started something deeper, a conversation the church had avoided for too long. But not everyone was happy. Some leaders began to distance themselves. Some called her a distraction, a rebel, a threat to the order of the church. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had already lost the version of life she thought she needed. Now she was free to build something new. Not on the foundation of appearances, but on truth. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. Healing wasn't a straight path. It came with ups and downs, days of strength, followed by nights of doubt. But even in those hard moments, she reminded herself why she had spoken up. It wasn't just about her marriage. It was about breaking a cycle, one that had trapped so many women in silence, especially within the walls of faith. Her story had become more than a testimony. It had become a message, one that echoed louder than any sermon. She focused on her children next. They had seen too much, heard too much, and carried a weight that no child should ever bear. She sat them down, not to protect the image, but to tell the truth, with love, with grace. She wanted them to know that strength wasn't in pretending, but in being honest. That love didn't mean losing yourself, and most of all, that walking away from pain isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Slowly, they began to heal too. The laughter returned. The house felt lighter. She was building a new kind of home, one where truth lived openly. Let me tell you something powerful. Her faith didn't die in the storm. It deepened. For so long, her relationship with God had been tied to ministry life, to titles, to roles. But now she was discovering a personal faith, a quiet, steady, intimate kind of faith, the kind that didn't need platforms or followers, just honesty and surrender. She began leading small healing circles, not big church events, just safe spaces, spaces where women could cry without being judged, where no one had to pretend they were blessed and highly favored while battling depression at home. She began painting again. This time, her art wasn't for approval, it was for her. Every stroke of the brush was a step back to herself. Her colors were bold, her themes were raw, and her pain became her palette. Destiny truly had taken an unexpected turn, because what once broke her was now rebuilding her. And though the scandal still followed her name in some circles, she no longer let it define her. She wasn't the woman who exposed Pastor Mike Todd. She was the woman who exposed the truth, who refused to let image destroy her identity, who risked everything to save herself. What makes this story different? It didn't end with revenge or bitterness, it ended with rebirth, with a woman standing tall in her truth, refusing to be silenced ever again. Her life now serves as a living reminder. No matter how deep the pain, no matter how long the silence, it's never too late to find your voice. Never too late to start over. The people who once judged her? Some apologized, others stayed silent, but she didn't need their approval anymore. Her worth was never tied to their opinion. She had found something better. peace. Not the fake kind you post about online, but the real kind you feel when you no longer live a lie. She hopes her journey reaches anyone who feels trapped behind a fake smile, anyone who is scared to speak, anyone who thinks silence is safer. Because the truth is, freedom doesn't come from staying quiet, it comes from standing up, speaking out, and choosing yourself even when the world tells you not to. Her story didn't end in ruins, it began in ruins and rose into something real.